Squatch Senior here, back on this M project. Been kind of a really hectic, busy spring here with garden, lawn cleanup, removing some trees, some building remodel projects. Dry weather gives you extra time, required extra time in the garden to keep that going and stuff. So anyway, I got the materials I need, all the cutters I need. Set up here to start milling the shaft out for this oil pump that has so much wear. So anyway, this is kind of the way I got her set up. This is just a demonstration right here. I did start doing a little cutting. Used all this to get my key seat cutter centered to the shaft and stuff. So got my machinery's handbook here with all the dimensions needed for depth and exposure, stuff like that. So anyway, we'll get busy and see if we can finish cutting out a key seat here. I don't get in a hurry with this. It's kind of my first experience of doing this. So, like I say, I'm just kind of a novice machinist. I'm starting out with a longer shaft than needed. In case I make a mistake, I'll just cut this section off and try it again. I just got an inch into it. I don't want to crowd the cutter. There we go. Just shaving off a really nice shave like that. Doing a real slick job. Anyway, I'm going to turn the camera off now so I can really concentrate on what I'm doing, and we'll get back to you in a little bit. Just about bottomed out on the key seat. I got, according to my machinery handbook for exposure, stuff like that, I got about 3 thousandths more depth to cut, and I'm going to call this one done. Okay, that should be it. I'm just going by the dial on the hand crank here, and from what I found so far, it's been right on the money. It looks a little crude, but it does work good. But all I can do now is take her out, put the key in, and see if the gear press is on. Now we'll do a quick look at what I ended up with here. I should mention too, this is a ground and polished shaft that I got. You can see my new cutter made some pretty good nice chips there. I'm well satisfied with it. And we'll take a look at the keyway, and here's the key, and that fits in there. And I'm thinking we're looking actually pretty good. So next up, we'll start pushing that gear on and see if it's fitting the way it's supposed to. Okay, here's what I got. I haven't got it all the way in yet. I still got to drill a hole through the shaft for the pin. That's another project coming up. But you can just barely see the key sticking out there. I did have to mill a little bit deeper to get her in there, but it's a nice tight fit and stuff, and I think she'll work out just fine. Okay, here I am. I'm set up for the second key seat there. I'm just going to leave my shaft long for now until I get this one done. I'm satisfied with it. I can cut that to length later. So I did my measurement from this key seat to this one. I'm within a few thousandths of length, which I can get by with it quite a bit because I got a lot of length in the gear. I can slide it in. Where I'm going to have to really be close is when I drill my pinholes through, because that's going to set my clearances up inside the pump. So anyway, let's get going cutting the second key seat. Okay, just a few thousandths left to go. Okay, I'm going to leave it right there. I'll back everything off, put the key in and do my measurements, make sure I'm right where I need to be. Okay, I think she looks good. It's identical protrusion on this one as I did on my first one. I maintained all my settings on the milling machine and it come out exactly where it should. I'm thinking it looks really good. And when I do my measurements, I do a micrometer just to make sure. And I think it's looking good. Next up, cutting the length and getting my pinholes drilled to lock the gears on. Okay, got all the key seats milled stuff. Next up, I got to drill the shaft. Each gear's got a pin that holds it on, keeps it in place. So I'll get the milling machine off of this setup and get it set up with drill chuck, stuff like that, and start getting things lined up and drill the shaft out. Okay, got my hole drilled. Took a reamer, reamed it to size. Got the pin installed in the gear and mushroomed over on both sides to keep it from drifting out. Pretty good comparison here to the old shaft to the new. Looks considerably better. So next up, what I'm going to do is install the gear and shaft into the pump housing. I'm going to set up the clearance inside, and then after I get that set up, I'll slide the gear on here to determine where my next pinhole goes. Okay, got the shaft installed in the pump housing, and I'm about ready to check the end clearance on the gear to the plate. Now the end clearance is 3 to 5 thousandths, and you can get gaskets. I got 2 of them. The gaskets come at 3 thousandths each, so I got 2. I only had 1 in. I'm assuming that should be all I need. So let's get this thing put together and we'll get the clearances checked. Got the gears installed, got the plate on, torque down, got her set up in the vise on the milling machine here. It made me a little stud that goes in the T-slot nut there. I can fasten my indicator to. Let's get set up here and see what our end clearance is. Okay, we'll zero it out. Okay. Right on 3 thousandths. 3 to 5 is spec and right on 3. That's excellent. Next up, we'll get the key put in, and I'm going to press the gear on. It's pretty like a real snug press fit in there. The reason I wanted to set my backlash up first is I don't want this gear bottoming out on the housing and giving me erroneous readings there. So get this gear pressed on. I'm going to leave probably 5 to 10 thousandths clearance between the gear and the housing. Then I can get set up to get my pinhole drilled. Okay, I'm set up here, get my final hole drilled. And what I did, I slid the gear on, got my clearance with the housing. I measured the shaft extension here with my dial caliper to about 25 thousandths inch extension. And that should maintain my clearance there. So that's where I'm going to drill it, and we'll keep our fingers crossed it all works out the way it's supposed to. Like I say, I'm just kind of an amateur at this, so. I like just clear the chips once in a while, make sure I'm not getting packed up on the bit. Okay, we're through. I'm going to leave it right there. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'll take this gear off again. I'm going to do a final cleaning on everything, and we'll get it all put back together, drive my pin in, and see what we end up with. Okay, I've got all my parts all cleaned up here, ready for a reassembly. I've got all my diameter clearances on the case, are all in spec. End clearance 3 to 5 thousandths, that was at 3, and the teeth backlash. They're all checked well within spec, so I feel real satisfied with that. What I'll be doing is probably using some assembly lube on getting this stuff all lubed up and stuff before it goes in. I will be installing also a new pressure relief spring too, just to make sure this thing should be in top-notch condition. So anyway, let's get going, get this thing put together. Don't really need a lot of grease on these. I just kind of make sure everything's coated in case it sits for a little bit, which is likely to do, that it doesn't rust up on me. Okay, to install the idler gear, I do have a mark on the end of the gear. And you can see a wear pattern where the pinhole in the drive gear goes. So what I did with the keyway off to the left, my pinhole is right there. That mark, it's got to go right in that gear right there. And that should be in mesh the way it originally ran. Make sure to get the teeth covered real good here. And out my upside. There we go, right there. I'll get a little on the bottom. Okay. Looking good. I moved my oil pump over here to the vise to help hold it. Got the gasket in place for the cover. That's the same one I used for checking my end clearance. All my gear mesh checked good. Side clearances all checked good on the case. So anyway, I got all my parts lubricated. We'll get them put in. First is regulating, oil pressure regulating valve there, and I put in a new spring, and this is where the fun begins. See if we can get that in place, and the bolt started with that spring tension. Make sure it's seated in the retaining hole. Okay, things are started. Make sure my gasket is all in position right, not kinked, bound. Okay, next up is get the gear on the end here installed. Everything is still turning good. So far, so good. Got the gear pressed on. My clearances are looking good in there. And all we got left to do, put the pin in, drive her through, and we should be done. Okay, the oil pump is complete. I'm well satisfied the way it turned out. I can still feel my end play there. I've got about 5 to 6 thousandths clearance between the housing and that gear, so that should not bind me up in any way. Turns free, backlash is really good, so we're going to call this a done job.